so he sent a video that I'll play. But David is the Chief Development Officer at DECA Research, the founder of a software company, and also a former White House Fellow. He's also a board member for Project Happy, so I'm going to play his video.
Hello, my name is David Rogers, and what breaking the simulation means to me is living in accordance with your own values. Oftentimes there are things that our society tends to value, measures of external success that can be difficult to live up to. And the expectations that other people try to impose on you are not always the ones that are the best for you or your own path. And so this was something that happened to me in my life. I grew up always thinking that I was going to become a pilot like my grandfathers. I joined the Air Force and attended the Air Force Academy, and that was my dream, was to become a pilot. That was the expectation. And about the middle of my senior year, I got a medical discharge. And it was pretty disruptive to my plans for the future, because now the thing that I had set my heart on was no longer an option for me. And so it took some time to figure out what my next step was going to be. And while I was trying to figure that out, I went with some friends on a short trip to East Africa, to the country of South Sudan. This was in about 2001. And while I was there, I met a bunch of students who, they had no school, no high school that they could attend. And the only hope that they had for getting an education was traveling more than 100 miles across the border into Uganda. And while I was there, 21 years old, meeting these young high school students, and they asked me if I would be willing to come back and help them start a high school. And they took me into the middle of the jungle, and they showed me the old high school that had been built back in the 1960s, that had been destroyed in the war and reclaimed by all of the jungle, the vines. You had to kind of cut through it with a machete to even get to the building. And so, like I said, I'm 21 years old, I'm right out of college, and that really stuck with me. It was just a short-term trip. I went back to the States when I'm at home, and I'm starting to think about what I'm going to do for my future. My dad's encouraging me to go to business school. I'm looking for a job. I'm working, back here in New Hampshire doing whatever. And it just really stuck with me that here was an opportunity that I had to make an impact in some people's lives. And so I talked to a few friends, I raised a little bit of money, and I went back to Africa. I made a down payment on a used Land Rover Defender, and with another friend of mine, we packed it full of supplies, enough food for about 4 months, detergent, shovels, whatever we could think of, we packed into this Land Rover. And then we started to drive up from Cape Town, South Africa, into South Sudan, a little town called Mundri. It's about a 5,000-mile trip, and went through all different countries. We get there, and the students come running out to see us. They never expected that we were going to come back. It kind of blew their mind that we did. And we ended up staying and working there for almost 4 years, and opened up the school, hired teachers, got it started, got it going. And that was just a tremendous experience for me, because it was so counter to what everyone expected that I would do with the early stages of my career. I wasn't going to business school. I wasn't getting experience in a professional world. I was doing an education project in the middle of Africa in the middle of the Civil War. But what ended up happening was that gave me an opportunity to develop some experience and to really be tested in an environment with responsibilities that it's hard to get in other types of environments. And so that was a great experience for me, and it came about because in some ways, to use the metaphor for this conference, I looked for an opportunity to break the simulation. I kind of rejected some of the traditional paths that were open to me, and I took an opportunity that ultimately really helped me to develop as an entrepreneur and gave me life experiences that I would never have gotten in another way. And so that was a tremendous experience, and I don't regret a minute of it. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jason Plant. Jason is the principal at Ryan Angel Fund, and he's the co-president of the Founders Club. He's an associate at 10X Venture Partners, and he's also the owner and author of Venture Time, an online publication covering startup and venture capital topics. Thank you, Jason.
The thing that's different about a verbal
Thank you, Jack. We exist at a critical point in human history. We have a choice to make. Do we want our world to look more like option 1 or option number 2? I can tell you which direction we're probably headed, but there's still hope. Today, our economy functions linearly. What do I mean by this? Well, our production process starts by extracting raw materials from the earth, which we then manufacture into products, ship to customers, and the customers enjoy them to their heart's content. But what happens when we're done enjoying our products? They get thrown away. This is why we have over 5 trillion pieces of plastic in our oceans, why the US alone produces over 250 million tons of trash per year, and why we continue to deplete our non-renewable resources that we need to sustain humanity. It's easy to see why this is hurtful to the environment, but companies that are invested in this model are also missing out on saved costs and increases to their recurring revenues. Some companies are so heavily invested in this model that they exploit our tendency to throw out old products in favor of new ones using a strategy called planned obsolescence. What if there was a different way to manage our product life cycle? One that eliminated waste while making companies more profitable. The solution is inspired by what nature has been doing for the last billion years. Nature's resource flow is cyclical, not linear. And there's no endpoint like a landfill. Instead, when an organism dies, it's either eaten by another organism or it decomposes, leaving its nutrients in the soil for future generations to enjoy. In nature, there is no such thing as waste. The circular economy emulates nature's ability to continually reuse resources in a cyclical fashion by recapturing waste and putting it towards producing new products and materials. This greatly reduces or eliminates waste in product life cycles, but at scale, it can prevent the depletion of our non-renewable resources that we need to sustain humanity and our planet. So let's look at a basic example. This is something we've probably all seen: recycling plastic water bottles that end up into the ocean and turning those into new products. This is great and it eliminates waste in the short term, but it's not what I would call a perfect circle. In fact, there's still harm happening along the way because the plastic still ends up in the ocean. And the core source of this waste is not addressed. The best circular economy solutions are proactive rather than reactive. They address the source of the waste stream so that that harm that happens along the way can never happen along the way. One company that I see as a shining example of circular economy thinking at work is called Redwood Materials. This company is building a global circular economy supply chain for electronic parts and batteries. And one of their core services is helping electronics companies do what is called reverse logistics to recover end-of-life products. If logistics is how we get the product into the customer's hands, reverse logistics is how we get the product back to the company that created it to reuse in production. And this concept called reverse logistics saves companies millions of dollars a year in sourcing and manufacturing costs. And Redwood Materials, they're not addressing a small niche opportunity. There's 50 million tons of electronic waste being produced per year. And just by doing what this company does best, they've achieved a $4 billion valuation in their Series C and gotten an investment from Amazon. There is real value creation potential in circular economy solutions And this is just one example of a company that's harnessed this potential. But reverse logistics is even easier when the customer never owned the product in the first place. Instead of doing a one-time transaction, companies like Circle Lab are renting, leasing, or licensing out products like washers and dryers to customers. For the customer, this mitigates the risk of making that upfront payment and then finding out 7 or 8 years down the road, long past the warranty is expired, that the product is not as durable as you hoped it would be. For companies like Circle Lab, the benefit is that it gives you recurring revenues. No longer are companies like this doomed to spend tons of dollars on marketing to achieve these one-time transactions. Now they have recurring revenues and they can curate those loyal customers. Another great thing about circular economy is that it's not just limited to products that customers are disposing of. It can also be applied to production byproducts, to waste from the public sector, and to entire communities. My company, for example, installs filtration devices at wastewater treatment plants that take out phosphorus, which would be a pollutant in waterways and is instead being diverted to being sold into the fertilizer industry, where they're suffering from drastic price hikes as a result of the global phosphorus shortage. By doing this, we can clean waterways, we can save costs for our fertilizer customers, and we close the loop on phosphorus, which is a critical and irreplaceable nutrient when creating agriculture and, by extension, our food supply. Amsterdam is an even more impressive example doing what is called circular city design, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a city that runs on circular economy principles. Sounds pretty ambitious, but luckily for us, Amsterdam has provided their playbook for how they did it. Firstly, they manage the flow of raw materials through their community. You can't manage what you don't measure, and with a system as complex as a city, you need big data in order to decide how you're going to allocate those big government dollars and how to control the inflows and outflows of resources. Secondly, they use public policy levers to encourage shared economy solutions. Think Airbnb and Uber, but for affordable housing and transportation. The shared economy is super compatible with the circular economy because, in its essence, it uses excess capacity from people that have already bought homes and vehicles and gives that capacity to people that need it. This diverts waste that would have been created when creating new homes and new vehicles, and creates a lot of value for the communities in the process. And lastly, they employed a number of material reuse strategies, a lot like the ones that I mentioned earlier in this presentation. And the results are staggering. They had 900,000 tons of material savings, which is about a quarter of the region's annual imports. And the local economy is expected to grow by 2,000 jobs and $240 million of value every single year as a result of truly integrating the circular economy into this one community. But the circular economy is needed on a global scale as well, and the donut economics framework is a perfect illustration of why, and it's quite simple. If we end up in the middle of the donut under what we call the social foundation, we're not using enough resources to meet our people's needs. But if we find ourselves on the outside of the donut, beyond what we call the ecological ceiling, we're using far too many resources, to the point where it jeopardizes future generations' ability to enjoy the same quality of life that we do today. So we want to be in that happy, light green middle zone, the donut. Where do we all think that the United States lies on this chart? So there's good news and bad news in this chart. The good news is that in the United States, we meet our needs pretty well for the most part. But the bad news is we're using far too many resources to do so, as we've exceeded 6 out of the 7 categories of the ecological ceiling. This is exactly why circular economy is needed on a national and global scale. Because at its essence, what the circular economy does is it meets the same needs with far fewer resources. So in conclusion, the circular economy is not just a different business model. It's a complete mindset shift away from the economy that we've been living in today. I hope you'll all join me in chasing the social, environmental, and economic opportunities that the circular economy offers to our organizations and to our communities. This is just the beginning, and we can all be a part of the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And just to wrap up tonight, I just want to first say thank you to our wonderful speakers. I know how much time and effort it takes to prep for a night like tonight, so thank you all so much. Thank you for everyone who came. It wouldn't have happened without you all, so thank you all for your support. And I hope you're all leaving a little bit more inspired and understanding a little bit more what it means to be a sim breaker. So we have the room for a little bit longer tonight, so feel free to stay, network,